Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jensen, and this is Module 2, Crime, Criminality, and the Media, Part 2. So first we'll do a quick housekeeping item for criminology majors, and then we're going to jump into criminological theories and hopefully demystify them a bit and make theory maybe not so abstract and complicated and a little more applicable to what we're studying. So first, what will criminology teach me? So this was a question posed to faculty at the American Society of Criminology, and I really liked the answer they gave. So criminology faculty feel that Police Academy is the best place for a student to learn about criminal procedure and how to shoot a gun. A study of criminology will teach the critical thinking and judgment necessary to know when to leave a gun in its holster, and provide students an examination of factors such as race, class, gender, and context, as well as the social processes that can inform criminal justice practice and policy. So as you can tell, criminology is quite a bit different than Police Academy, but we're looking at those critical thinking skills, a higher worldview, communication skills, de-escalation, leadership, and then also just raw practical skills like research, analysis, and other skills that we think help people become a little bit better prepared and well-rounded when they look at criminal behavior. So this might be something you can use with friends that are asking you about why you're studying criminology. Okay. Criminological theories. So remember that we mentioned that media speculate about the explanations of criminal behavior, and oftentimes those speculations are wrong and not scientific and are just a gut reaction from what's being felt at the moment. This lecture will cover theory more in depth because the Surratt text really does not delve into this deeply, so this is a little bit supplemental to what you're reading. But first, what's a theory? Sometimes people go, yeah, I know I should have learned that in high school, but I don't know that it's quite clear, and sometimes those misconceptions are carried forward into college. But essentially, a theory is just ideas about observable events or phenomena. You're making connections and suggesting explanations with what you see. All theories have assumptions, and those assumptions lead us to examine events to find evidence of what we believe is happening. We have to start somewhere with what is present and what is occurring first, last, or because of, or caused by. Most theories also encounter empirical testing that have requirements of validity, reliability, and generalizability. And these are concepts that you'll come into more familiarity with when you study research methods, as far as making sure we're accurate and that we're hitting the target and that they can be applied more broadly. So here are some of these assumptions that we want to get after, just to kind of uncover maybe some of your thoughts about explanations of crime. So one assumption is the free will versus determinism assumption. So what are the reasons a crime's committed? Well, if you're someone that believes in free will, you would believe that a person has a choice, options, and some kind of awareness to act or not act, or we call it refrain from acting. Free will is accompanied by a belief in punishment, responsibility, and a reward for good citizenship. On the other hand, you have people that are maybe more subscribers to determinism, or a life chosen for you, predestination, maybe with genetic or biological factors that are in control, psychological traits, perhaps even influence of the environment, and some kind of inability to change. Determinism is accompanied by a belief in lessened or no responsibility, rehabilitation and treatment, or being able to predict and isolate criminals, and even in extreme circumstances, exterminate them. So most people don't fully subscribe to just one side or the other. They might have a blend of certain things. So here's some of that blend. We call it the middle ground or situational determinism, where a person's past or history is combined with family or health issues offering less choices or options available to them, and so there's kind of some influence going on in the environment. You also have situations with triggers and factors that are at play. So a trigger induces your choices, meaning the focus would be on preventing the situation from occurring. And factors would include people with certain attributes prone to making certain choices, and the focus would be on keeping people out of those situations. And so you can approach this from kind of the external or the internal side. And sometimes I get the question, well, what's the difference between psychology and sociology? They both study behavior, so why are there different social sciences about it? And I say, well, psychology is studying people from the inside out, and sociology is studying people from the outside in. And that's where the focus is. But at the end of the day, both are studying behavior. They're just approaching it from different perspectives. And that's some of what we see in criminology too, is the focus on the behavior, on the individual, on the reaction, on the group, or on society. So they're just looking at it from different levels. So your text emphasizes behavior versus reaction, and distinguishing between behavior and social reaction is really important for theories, because some theories focus on behavior, like having low self-control causing crime. Some theories will focus on societal reactions, things like racial threat or competition for scarce resources, and those might explain punitive reactions. Other theories would incorporate both, such as maybe labeling theory, as a dynamic process back and forth of defining crime, applying stigma, and then secondary deviance or having more behavior come as a response to that. So those are important things to keep track of when we look at what theories have to offer. Some of you have already had criminological theories, others maybe not, but you're going to go into this more in depth in that class. Unit of analysis is also important, as we mentioned previously. Are we looking at the person or maybe a group as far as traits that are more criminogenic, right? So some theories focus on individuals. So for example, biological theories will link violence to chromosomal differences, mutations, hormones, chemical differences in the brain. We have psychological theories that will focus on personality traits or mental illness as something that is influencing crime. We also have theories that focus on groups, saying that it's a response to a larger force at work. So anomie theory, or what we call strain theory, are structural theories that say, crime rates are higher for those with blocked opportunities. They're more in need of things, and so they're more motivated to maybe commit crimes, especially property crimes. Political theories will deal with the political and economic structure of society, especially competition, and we call these conflict theories. So recall that one of the frames you studied in the last module from the text, our Surratt text, talked about print media from the 1800s and about the wealthy manipulating the system, and how a lot of the themes and narratives of crime presented were kind of, vilifying these wealthy people that controlled society and controlled wealth. And so that kind of starts to illustrate some of what we talk about when we talk about frames, and we talk about that conflict between the individual and the structure. Rational choice theory is a theory heavily emphasized in the Surratt text, although I believe it's kind of a mismatch for what Surratt is trying to argue. So I'm going to present some alternatives to this as we go, but I'll cover some of the basics of rational choice theory so that you can follow what Surratt says. So remember, rational choice theory has these assumptions. So essentially, you have these choices, you do kind of cost-benefit analysis. What are the risks? What are the benefits? Should I do it? So basically, law-violating behavior is the product of careful thought and planning. Offenders will choose a crime after considering both personal and situational factors. The reasoning criminal evaluates the risk of apprehension, the seriousness of the expected punishment, and the potential value or benefit of the criminal enterprise, his or her ability to be successful, and their own needs for criminal gain. So after all that is said and done, that's how we have criminal behavior occurring. So what are the strengths and weaknesses of these assumptions? Well, they do get at a calculated analysis of maybe some of those thoughts and behaviors and the connections that occur when people think about it. But it also assumes that people don't do spur-of-the-moment stuff, and that we're all very rational, logical people, and we aren't ruled by emotions, which can lead to us being really stupid. It doesn't explain those crimes very well. So beware of the rational choice theory in the text. That's kind of a brief overview of it. It has very weak evidence of effectiveness in the criminal justice system, although it is the theory that the justice system is entirely based upon, as far as punishment and release and these kind of things. So rational choice incorporates informal reinforcement and punishment beyond criminal sanctions, but we're often not aware of that reinforcement and the punishment mechanisms going on. And without awareness, how rational is our choice? Are we really understanding where we're at in a situation and what all is at work and involved in our decision-making process? Most of the time we're not, and these become obvious to us after the fact, when the action has already occurred. So it's hard for us to argue that we really know what we're doing and all the consequences when we're doing criminal behavior. Another principle that is kind of related to rational choice theory is what we call general deterrence theory, or classical criminological theories that look at certainty, severity, and swiftness. Okay, so certainty is, do I think I'm going to get caught? How likely am I to be arrested, convicted, and that punishment or sanctions will happen of some kind? Now, clearly we know that criminals outnumber police, and police would have to be everywhere at all times in order to catch everybody, and that's just not viable or possible. So certainty is a tough one. Severity, how strict or lenient are the punishments? So this is a perception of fairness. Some people say if things are too severe, then you'll get chaos in society, revolution and rebellion. If punishments are too lenient, then you'll get chaos in society where you get people doing whatever they want and having no consequences and basically wreaking carnage and cannibalizing each other. So an example of issues with severity, if you read kind of texts, ancient texts, whether it's the Code of Hammurabi, you look at criminal law or moral law, maybe even an example of the Ten Commandments, those kinds of things. In the Bible, if you read it from a social science perspective, the book of Leviticus is actually the law, and this is where you see the law portrayed in the Bible. For fun, I actually just counted how many offenses were punishable by death, and there were 39 different offenses. Most of them had to do with deviant marriage that were punishable by death. And so we think about, what does it mean in society if our response to every criminal offense is the death penalty? And for a long time, even in the 1800s and the early part of the 20th century, we did have death-eligible offenses for things like pickpocketing and stealing chickens. Pretty minor offenses that, had a pretty severe punishment. Over time, we decided that that was a sign of a more barbaric society and that not everything should be death penalty eligible. And so we started to change some of the punishment. There might be people that think we should go back to that system and that it would be a strong deterrent against crime. But again, it's about living in a threat system. And there are also different consequences that come with that. So the last part of general deterrence is swiftness. And we talk about the time it takes to make the connection between the act and the consequences. So you have to be punished in time to understand that what you did was wrong, bad. And that's probably the thing that we think is the biggest failure of the criminal justice system, is the speed at which we try and prosecute, convict, and sentence people. It takes a really long time to go through the criminal justice process. And so that's probably what we struggle with the most. And that's one of the biggest arguments that critics of rational choice or deterrence theory have, is how can we possibly connect our act to the punishment when there's so much distance between the two? So creating this threat system on the surface is really meant to embed some fear within us so that we comply with the right way of doing things, that we become pro-social, that we adhere to norms of civility and peace. And that's what this is all about. So out of these concepts, which would you feel is most important? Some people say it's swiftness or severity, but actually research shows that it's certainty. We have to be certain that we'll be caught, or all of this kind of crumbles to the ground. Kind of wrapping up, we have to think about some other concepts about how we capture crime and measure it in our communities, because this is the evidence by which all theories are measured against and evaluated upon. So we'll come into this a little bit later too in future modules, but I thought it was a good introduction to it here. So I have something called the crime funnel, and essentially this shows you kind of what happens to criminals at every decision point in the criminal justice system. Okay, so this could be any given year. It doesn't change a whole lot year to year. But if we said, you know, at the very top in this green section, this is 100% of crime, or essentially how many felonies are committed annually. We're not going to get into misdemeanors for now. We're just going to talk about felonies, or the more serious crimes. So about 42 million felonies are committed each year. And we know this via self-report and crime reports and kind of corroborating evidence that that's a pretty good estimate of how much crime happens each year. As far as taking 100% of all known crime and drilling down into serious crimes that are actually reported, we lose about 2/3 of that. So only 29% of those 42 million felonies committed every year turn into a crime report, or approximately 12 million. So then we ask ourselves, well, why don't we report a crime? Well, we have all kinds of reasons for this. You know, we'll say things like, it's not worth it, I'm not going to get my stuff back, I don't have time, I don't want to get involved, or maybe I think that they'll seek revenge, they're going to find out I reported and I'm worried about my safety. So there are all kinds of inhibitions to reporting crime that come out of logical places. So, and then there are other times where we should report crime and maybe we're lazy and we don't. So 29% of all known crimes turn into a crime report. Out of those crimes that are reported, that 12 million, we go into this orange section that talks about arrest. So how many serious crimes reported actually turn into an arrest? About half. So 14% of those crimes known now drill down from the 12 million to only about 6 million that report an arrest. Okay, so again, charges are dropped, the investigation goes nowhere, we can't find a suspect pool, people lawyer up and protect themselves. You know, do we have enough evidence to make a legal arrest? And can we catch people in the act? Well, 90% of the time we're not going to catch people in the act. So getting a felony arrest out of a known crime is still a challenge. So now we're down to 6 million. How many people are actually convicted after they're arrested? Only about 2.2%. So 915,000 felony convictions happen each year because, again, there are lots of decision points and requirements that come into play when we think about what it takes to get a conviction, right? And then at the very end of the funnel, we're down to 1%. How many people are actually sent to prison annually? About 420,000. Okay, so remember, sentencing involves a lot more than prison. You can be sentenced to probation, you can be sentenced to pay fines or fees, you can be sentenced to electronic monitoring. It doesn't mean you're going to prison. You can be sentenced to jail time, which is shorter than a prison sentence, usually. So if we start at the top, 42 million people committing a felony, and go all the way to the bottom, that it really only punishes 420,000, it means that most people get away with crime. Most people. And maybe this really undermines our public trust or confidence in the system, and you could argue that it does. But these are the realities of discretion, of a system that is attempting to be fair and impartial, and even just luck of being able to find people and be at the right place at the right time, witnessing people doing things they shouldn't do, and having the means to apprehend them and the evidence to support their conviction. So again, so many decision points in the justice system reveal really what happens in the data each year. So occasionally students will tell me, I want to write a paper about crime. And I go, okay, well, what about crime do you want to write about? And they say, well, I want to study people that are arrested, or I want to study people that are convicted. And I said, okay, realize that you're leaving other people out. So if you're studying people that have been arrested, you're not studying all crime. If you're studying people that have been convicted, you're not even getting everyone that's been arrested, let alone people that have committed crime. So you're coming in at a known decision point in the system that is going to matter and impacts the kind of data you get and who you're actually studying. You know, these are the people that got caught. These are the people that got arrested. These are the people that we know about. So just to kind of wrap up, the most dangerous places in the United States, if we actually pull violent crime rate across the U.S., again, we see patterns. And these patterns impact our perception of where we think it's safe and where we think it's dangerous to live. The places that are gray, we didn't have sufficient data to document, but this covers most counties in the United States. And generally, one thing you see immediately is a temperature relationship with crime. So generally in the warmer areas of the United States and also the more highly populated areas, you're going to see higher crime rates. Okay? So it's kind of interesting to see what the data show and what people actually believe and therefore the choices they make. We also have this graph too that shows the actual murder rate. So the more red it is, the higher the murder rate is in those places. And this does not perfectly correspond to the most dangerous places in the US. Okay? It doesn't overlay very well. And again, this is because violent places might not necessarily be places where you're going to get killed. Because most violent crime is assault and robbery, not murder. So when people say this place is violent, they're probably talking more about assault and robbery, but not death. So again, we have to recognize how crime actually occurs and what the data actually tell us. And then we're going to use these kinds of data to try to determine the best theories that describe what we see happening. And again, we have to be ever conscious of our own biases and our own presentations of crime that maybe are constructed from media to make sure they're not getting in the way of the science of trying to get the actual answer. So I hope this helps, and we'll see you next time.